Fredrick, John, Charles, Morris.
And where were you born?
I was born in London.
When? What year?
1926. So I made my application, I think, at 17 and a quarter, and I think it was July of 43 that I had my interview in London. And he spent 2 days in London. He went up twice in the Air Training Corps uniform. And in the end, after all the tests and interviews, he was sworn in and given a day's pay and given your number, and that was who you were on then on the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve. So you waited. The stipulation was that I would, if I wanted to train as a pilot, I had to go to college for six months to top up my education, which had been interrupted. That was the scheme that they brought in to save people from failing when they got through to the higher demands of education, perhaps in Canada or America or somewhere. So I accepted that and came back, waited for my call-up. I was called up on the 20th of December 1943 to report to Lord's Cricket Ground. That was the receiving place. We arrived by tube, marched up to the Lord's Cricket Ground, went in and sat in the stands, December. I think we had some soup and they took photographs of us and one thing and another. And then we were put into commandeered luxury flats in St John's Wood area. Everything had been stripped out of them apart from RAF beds. We had our food in what was the restaurant of the zoo, Regent Park Zoo. We used to march backwards and forwards to breakfast and evening meal with a hurricane lamp at the back of the squad so we didn't get knocked down by a car coming on, because they didn't have very good headlights in those days, they were covered. So that was Monday the 20th I joined. On Friday of that week, on parade that morning, they said, we're going to issue a limited number of 48-hour passes. 3 stipulations. You have to live within 25 miles of here as the crow flies. I thought, well, that's okay, do that. You had to have been in the Air Training Corps or one of the cadet forces. Fine, I've done that for 2 years. You have to pass a uniform inspection. So I went on the uniform inspection and passed it. So on the Friday afternoon, Christmas Eve, I arrived back home. I'd been away 4 days, or less than 4 days. They didn't know I was coming because we had no telephone at home. Very few people did in those days. So I arrived at home in the afternoon, or early evening rather, to the surprise of my parents. And my mother and father were there, younger sister, and my brother, who was 4 years older than me, stepbrother, and he was home on leave from the RAF also. So father said that, now he said, we've got both my lads home, he said, we're going round the pub. I said, well, I can't go to the pub, Dad. I said, I'm not 18 till January. If you can wear the King's uniform, you can go round to the pub, he said. So we did. Not that he was a heavy drinker of any sort, but he just wanted, I think, to show his lads off to his chums. So that's what we did. So that was my first. After 4 days, I was on leave, so that was very good. And then we came up to Manchester.
How long were you in Manchester for?
Well, we did a 6 month course, 3 months, a week's leave, and then another 3 months, and we did all the normal subjects, nothing to do with the RAF apart from a couple of hours on a Wednesday afternoon when they gave us a bit of drill, and we ran round Peel Park in Salford to keep us fit. So after leaving Manchester, a bit confused because we went back to London. We started all the tests. They brought in another set of tests, I think they've been devised by the Canadians, to try and whittle down the number of failures that they were doing. We did that. You had to run so far, 100 yards in such a time. You had to swim a certain length. You had to be able to take a squad. You had to pass, sending Morse. You had to pass various exams of all sorts. And then we ended up with another interview board of 4 or 5 officers, and then you were given your classification. And they just brought in a new classification, what they called air bomber, or bomb aimer, as it was generally known. So I put that down as one of my choices. I think it was the second choice. Pilot first, second choice, air bomber. And I was selected as air bomber. And it was an interesting category, really, because in that little booklet I've got in the other room there, it tells you were, I considered that was why you were flying over there, to drop the bombs. So the chap who was dropping the bombs was the most important. That's why everybody else took him over there so he could drop his bombs. You had to be assistant navigator. You had to guide the pilot onto the target, of course. You were assistant navigator. You were second pilot, and you also a front gunner when you weren't dropping your bombs. So it was quite an interesting combination of all the skills, really. So I was selected as that. I was then posted, after various delays, to Andreas, on an air gunnery school on the Isle of Man. So all in all, I spent about 6 months on Andreas. The only dramatic thing that happened while I was on the Isle of Man was, got the date of it in the other room, I think it was sometime in April 45 by this time. We were in the NAFI club at lunchtime when RAF police came dashing in and ordered everybody out of the NAFI, irrespective of who you are or what you are, onto a lorry outside. And once we got on the lorry, off the lorry set, and we went up halfway up the mountain. And when we got up there, there'd been a crash, and we were to bring the survivors, the bodies down, not the survivors, no survivors. And it was a Flying Fortress B-17 that had flown over from England, and it had crashed in mist into the mountain, and all on board were killed. The surprising thing was, if you ask anybody how many would a Flying Fortress carry, well, the crew I think was up to about 10, but using it as passengers, you could probably get a few more in. But there were 31 people on that train, and they were all killed. We helped carry the bodies down, and according to a book that I have, the following day another B-17 came in and took the bodies out. And I think that's wrong, because I can recall that there was a black DC-3 Dakota came in, and they put them in there. Because I think, if you've ever been inside a B-17, there's not very much room. You might get 31 people, well, you must have done, get 31 people in there, crammed in. But to get 31 bodies in, and a crew to fly it, I think that's most unlikely. So I dispute that. But that was a very sad thing, just before the end of the war. And they weren't all aircrew people. There were some people, I've got the whole list of names. Some of them were just mechanics. They were giving them a flight. They were going to Ireland on a weekend break. That's what was happening. But it ended up in tragedy. I think it's one of the, well, I'm sure during the war it was probably the highest number of people killed in one aircraft. 3 of us who had been together for some time on the driving course and one thing or other, we volunteered to go up, and we went up to RAF Ramley in Palestine by train,
Whereabouts is that?
There's South Palestine.
Right.
Doesn't appear on the maps these days. I think they've changed the name slightly of it. Anyway, we went up there, and that was the headquarters, number 2 Armour Company, Royal Air Force, which had been formed in 1922 from the remnants of Lawrence's armour cars and on the instigation of Winston Churchill. They were formed in England in 1922. I think there were 6 companies originally, but the main 2 were one in Iraq, number 1 company, and number 2 company in Palestine. And they'd served out there all that time, and during World War II they served with the British Army at El Alamein, and one of the COs got the MC there. And I actually met him some years later. He died in 2006, I think, 93. A legend in his own right, they said, and he was a character. So we went up there and we did our training. We did a couple of weeks training there, and we were then remustered, changed our trade again to armoured car crew. Now, armoured car crew had groups in the RAF, 1 to 5, the trade groups, and number 1 being the best. Number 5 was air crew, believe it or not, but armoured car crew was group 2, so it was on a good rate of pay. I think that was one of the things that persuaded us to go up. And we passed the course there, and then were allocated to go to the different sections. The company had 4 sections. Each section had 6 cars, plus a couple of lorries for light aid deployment, like a travelling workshop, a jeep, a wireless wagon, and perhaps 1 or 2. Well, we had 1 or 2 captured vehicles as well.
What were they?
Auto Union was the one I remember most. It was the thing that you could drive it backwards, forwards and sideways. It was an armoured car. I think I have a photograph of it somewhere. And while we were there, we moved from camp to camp, doing various jobs, escorting in the main, a bit of guarding, but driving around airfields at night, that sort of thing, out looking for terrorists.
Jewish terrorists or Palestinian?
Jewish terrorists. Oh, it was the Jewish terrorists in those days. They were the ones that were trying to kill us. And indeed, we lost 1 or 2 people. It was, the bombs that they have now in Afghanistan on the side of the road. Well, we had them then, and the first vehicle out in the morning, going out of the camp, went as fast as it possibly could. We had, underneath the armour cars that we had, there was a big steel plate, and you also put a sandbag under your feet in the cab. But even so, we still lost 1 or 2. We did all sorts of varying jobs.
What was it like to drive the armoured car?
Oh, I thought they were a good 4-wheel drive. Very, very good to drive. Yeah. Not so good off-road because they had no windscreen. You had a very small hole to look out. You always wore goggles, certainly off-road. Got extremely hot in the hot weather. But as I remember it, they were fun to drive. I enjoyed driving them. Quite powerful. We did some long trips. We did a trip. We did an escort all the way to Habania, which is just outside Baghdad, stopping overnight at the pump, the oil pump pipeline stations on the way across.
How long did that take?
How long did it take? Difficult to say. About 3 or 4 days, I think. We went up there, and it was very, very hot when we got there. I think I don't know why it sticks in my mind, I think they said it was a actually 130. But it was a beautiful camp, right out in the middle of the desert, but it was irrigated from the Euphrates, and it was completely surrounded by trees and bushes, and it was a wonderful place. Had an open-air cinema, swimming pool, everything you could think of. Been there, well established there for a long time. We spent a week there and then drove back. Excuse me. I'm not sure whether it was on this particular trip, but we used to go to Amman in Jordan on escorts and various jobs. And on one occasion we had a few days off, and we went down to Petra, the Rose Red City, and spent 2 or 3 days down there, which was memorable. Some friends of ours had just come back from there, and he started talking about the car park. I said, car park? I said, there wasn't even a road there when we went. There's a Hilton there now. And there's turnstiles to go in and things like that, and it cost, I think it's £38 to go in. But when we went, we just parked up alongside the Arab Legion fort and went in. But that was a memorable place to go. And that's one place I would like to go back to.
What were the people like? Did you?
We got on very well with the refugees, the Arab coming from Europe. They were much more very friendly. They were classed as illegal because there was a quota, but they were, like they're still doing now in different parts of the world. Perhaps one of the most interesting times was when we were working with the Palestine police in Tel Aviv. They had a similar cars to us, and what we used to do was we used to mix the crews up, because if you had a Palestine policeman on the crew, you had more powers than if it was just RAF. I mean, we couldn't really arrest anybody, but they had the power to do that, so that's how we used to mix the crews up. And we did that for some time, a couple of times, I think.
Doing patrols around Tel Aviv?
Yes, we used to do street patrols. And if there was an incident, we'd go to it.
What kind of incidents?
Well, there'd be bits of shootings and just disturbances, I think, in the main, as I can remember.
This was 46, wasn't it?
This was 46, and it went over into 47. Now, in their wisdom, about that time, the RAF decided, or they were persuaded, to transfer the armoured car companies from being Royal Air Force to RAF Regiment. And that took place. And the first thing that they came to us and they wanted us to change our basic uniform. We'd always worn shoes, because if you're in a hot vehicle, shoes are better than boots. But they wanted us to put boots and puttees on. We also had to wear berets, which we didn't like the idea, because we'd always had the old forage caps. But if you were driving off-road, you didn't wear a beret or a forage cap, you wore an Arab headdress. What was good enough for the Arabs was good enough for you, because you just put it on, put your goggles on, it kept the dust from your face and your eyes and your mouth. That's what we used to wear. Didn't like that at all, of course. No, we had to wear berets and puttees and boots and one thing or another. One or two interesting driving jobs. Drove the Roman Catholic Padre around in a Humbersnipe estate car for a while, all around all the different historic sites around Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth and all that.
That was interesting, wasn't it?
That was interesting. Spent Bethlehem, a Christmas Eve in Bethlehem, 1946. That was interesting. Relief driver on the fire engine in the camp, which again was quite interesting because they had two. One was a very, very old Fordson, and when you drove it down the runway, the mudguards flapped because they were a bit loose, and the other one was a huge American International thing. I think 5 or 6 of you could sit across in the front seat, sort of wide. That was interesting. And then we did a few trips up from one camp. I can't remember where it was. I think it was at RAF Akia at that time. And we used to go up to North Palestine, and it was the load on the lorry was 50-gallon drums of aviation fuel, and that was the thing to do with that. You had an escort with you with a Sten gun, but I don't know what he was going to do. But it was bomb alley sort of thing. He drove out in the morning and he went flat out. Fortunately, didn't lose anybody, and that was it.
Going out on these patrols, if you were the gunner, I mean, did you ever fire the gun at all?
Yes. I like to think I've never killed anybody, but I'm pretty sure I didn't. But there was odd times when, I think mainly it was if there was something suspicious in the road. If you saw something that looked a bit suspicious in the road, you just give a burst at it, and if it didn't blow up, well then. But we did fire guns in anger, quite. Mainly at night. If somebody fired at you, if you're out on a patrol and you got some rifle fire coming towards you, you just gave a burst.
Was it Browning?
The .5 Browning, that was quite something to fire. We didn't fire that very much, as I remember. Mainly, if it was something suspicious, we just give a burst with a brain gun from the side. The car that I drove was the only one in the whole, out of the whole 24, had been modified to take a mortar, and we used to fire a parachute flare out of this 2-inch mortar. And then you fired this thing and you see them scattering away and you just give them a burst, frighten the life out of them. But they were mostly Arabs that were doing that. They were trying to steal things. I think the only time I actually arrested anybody or had anybody at the end of a revolver, he turned out to be an undercover policeman, which I can't quite remember the exact circumstances, but we drove into somewhere and we got out and went into this building, and this chap was there, and I got my revolver out and I held him up against the wall, and when they checked him out, he was an undercover policeman.